Welcome, everybody. This is Taylor Sharp, and this is FMPUG Dallas, Texas on Friday, April 2nd, 2021. I'm Taylor Sharp, and Greg Price are our two chapter coordinators. We're glad to have everybody here today to have our FileMaker Pro User Group. Today, we're going to have Mr. Know-It-All Dennis Burnham of ASNAP and Burnham Business Development is going to teach us about signing documents with WebDirect. Dennis is a longtime member of the PUG here. He's a member of PUG in Denver, member of PUG in California, and he's involved all kinds of ways in FileMaker things. So we're obviously glad to have Dennis here. Most importantly, he likes to ski in the mountains, which I like to do with him when I can get up there. So as far as announcements, I don't know any big FileMaker announcements. I will mention that if you don't know, FileMaker has moved to its new headquarters, which is only about a fourth the size as there was over at the Wedge. So very different facility, much smaller. Maybe I guess they're expecting people to work more from home or something, but the headquarters is a whole lot smaller than it used to be. So
and stuck in the middle of some very generic, like industrial park.
Yes,
very unlike Apple's typical.
I thought some of their people are meeting at Apple, or working out of Apple's headquarters.
The only people that are working at Apple headquarters is they did move over HR services under the Apple umbrella is doing all of the HR stuff, but everybody else,
makes sense.
Tech and all is supposedly at the headquarters, but I think a lot of them are working from home, as we all know. But things are a little different there. It's I guess it's a little sad to see the Wedge was always very classic, unique, iconic looking building, you know, and what we have now is, you know, kind of, as Greg says, just blurs into general bland office space. So
from above, it looks like Sim City, very much like Sim City from above. Like
I guess that
all the buildings look exactly the same.
That probably means that they can't sell all of their Claris swag at the Apple gift shop.
Yes, it probably also means, I don't know if they're going to have a place for Dig FM to meet, a conference room or something. So that's all to be seen. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, they could use the Steve Jobs Theater for that.
There we go. Anyway, for those of you who haven't kept up, there is a 19.2.2 release of FileMaker Pro. So if you haven't updated on that, there is a recent release with some new things that are coming out. And I kind of actually forget what some of the features are on it. Oh, the big feature I will tell you is, if anybody's been like me and you do a big find on a unstored field calculation, you realize, oh, this is going to take forever, and so you hit the cancel button. Well, it doesn't cancel until you get in. Well, guess what? In 19.2.2, finally, if you're in a find, you hit cancel, it actually cancels the find and doesn't make you wait the whole time. So finally. Anyway, well,
I pressed that button in 1992, and I've been waiting for it to finish.
Yeah. Yeah. He hasn't been able to update his operating system since then.
Anyway, well, without further ado, Greg, do you have any FileMaker announcements before we get Dennis going?
No, but I do have a request of anybody in the group that may have experience with Dayback calendar. If anybody does, can you reach out to me or stick around after the presentation and we can maybe discuss a little bit?
I'll do that with you. It has a little bearing on what I'm actually showing today, because the client that I was working on for this Docu-Sign thing has Dayback installed. And my promise to them was that I wouldn't touch it to do anything with it. And the only thing that required some kind of change, I already took care of. They use it constantly for a shared calendar among a dozen or so people.
Right. Okay. Fantastic.
Right. But I also have some experience that I'd be able to show you that I know more about with the So Simple calendar from Paradise.
Okay, well, let's make it official. Dennis, you are up. We're glad to have you here and teach us.
Okay.
Oh,
Well,
and one thing before you get started there, Dennis, I just want to let everybody know, if anybody has any questions for Dennis during the presentation, go ahead and just put them into the chat. If you can bring up the chat, and that way Dennis or I can kind of review them after his presentation is done, and you can go ahead and address them.
I don't have the chat window open, so.
Well, I can read them off to you afterwards if
All
that
right,
works.
so you go ahead and interrupt me if you want. The only thing Taylor
Well,
forgot.
or I'll just let it go until the end. I'm sure
Okay.
it's probably fine to let you do your thing.
Okay. Well, the only thing Taylor forgot to say is that I'm the presenter of Last Resort.
We're glad to have you.
So I'm going to start this morning telling you a little bit about this app that I've been working on for a client here in Denver. They came to me, I guess it was in November, and they wanted me to investigate Docu-Sign for them. Like many other people, I suppose they just didn't want to spend the money on Docu-Sign, and they didn't know if there were any alternatives available. So I conceived of something that could be built for them in WebDirect, and they're happy with it. They like it. So what I'm going to do first is run you through a set of keynote slides to just set the stage for it, and then I'll go into the live demo of what it does. So first of all, we'll talk about why to use it, why not. I'm talking about WebDirect there. I'll show you what the components are that make it work, what the procedure is, and then we'll do the demo. So why to use WebDirect instead of Docu-Sign? Well, one thing is the money. Docu-Sign requires a subscription fee. You may or may not need Claris Connect for integration, but it would be foolish of me to ignore telling you that it's possible to use Claris Connect for integration. WebDirect, you can do the entire thing. If it fits all of your customers' needs, you can do it in FileMaker. Also, the user interface being 100% in your control, you're not limited by whatever the constraints would be with Adobe. You can do both fill-in forms. There are lots of options for that these days online. And you can also have people sign a document with the limitation that the signature isn't one of the, I don't know if I should call it official, but when you sign a Docu-Sign document from Adobe, your signature really means something. In this case, it's much more informal. And if you want to, you can enhance the content of the form that's being signed by using a plugin like the 360works Scribe, which works real well. Why not to use it? Is if you need any of the features in Docu-Sign that you just can't recreate in FileMaker, Docu-Sign doesn't consume any of your FileMaker container storage. So that would be another reason if you had a situation where you had many documents and you didn't want to be bothered with any of the server storage of those documents, you don't have to worry about where they are when they're in Docu-Sign. And if you know how to do the integration with Claris Connect, it might be faster to put it together that way. And there's some customers who will much prefer a brand name to something that you build for them on a custom basis. So these are the components, basically. In any database that you're going to build, you're going to have one table that's documents. And that documents table, in my case, is using external storage. I have a parent table in the case of the one that I built for my client, which is a Denver psychologist. So the principal table there are their patients. And for each patient, we've got any number of related documents. In my database, I have a root table. I call it globals. You'll see it in the demo. It's joined with all other tables. It basically follows that connector selector or selector connector, whatever they call it, that methodology of building a relationship graph, and I'll show you how simple that is. I use that in this case for some of the text that is I'm calling it template text. So if there's let's say you had a document that was a lease and it was the same basic document for everybody, I only have to have it in one place. So this root table has only one record in it, and that's where I would put things like that. You do have to build a unique layout for each unique kind of a document. So, if you had a lease, that would be one layout, and if you had a different document, it would have to have its own layout as well. I've got one script that I use to begin the process of creating any document, so it's a rather delicate script. And then there's another unique script for each kind of document. So every time my client comes to me with a new kind of a document that they need, I have to modify the one that I'm showing you in number 6 and build a brand new one for that kind of a document in number 7. I have one value list that lists all the different document types. Now, in what I'm going to be showing you today, there are only going to be 2 document types, and I'll show you that in a little while. Am I boring you, Taylor? And you have to, of course, configure FileMaker Server to use WebDirect. I've got one generic privilege set that is a real important part of this. FileMaker, or maybe I should say Claris, has made it, they've really limited the ability to have guest access to WebDirect. So if you're going to have people who are going to use the WebDirect portion and they don't have a FileMaker security account, there's a pretty delicate workaround that I've built that enables somebody to sign in if you give them a username and password, but that username and password is actually in their record, their personal record, rather than in FileMaker's list of security accounts. So you have a generic login, and then when they go in, they put in their own username and password that you've given them, and then everything is unique to them. And finally, I use a URL shortener. I really like the one that Google offered, but they discontinued it, so I'm using Bitly now as a way to have a shortened URL. And the reason for that is that, number one, I don't want people to start seeing the actual URL that is composed for getting into FileMaker WebDirect. And also, it makes the email message that goes out so much shorter. So this is the relationship graph in the database that I'm going to be showing you today. The reason I have those 2 table occurrences marked as not relevant is because they're not relevant to what we're talking about today. I'm using a database that I have been using for many years called Names. It's just a list that's got, I think 500 names in it with addresses and email addresses. They're all fake. And I use it sometimes when I have to populate a table with some records that can be used for demonstration purposes or for building something. So in this case, I renamed that table Members. I didn't want to use the FMPUG database with actual member names. So I'm using my database of 500 fake names, and I'm calling them members. And as you can see, each member is connected to my global table with a one-to-one relationship that just makes all members visible, and any member can see what's in the global table. And each member is connected to the documents table with their member ID. So let's begin with the sharing configuration. You've got to go into FileMaker's the sharing option in the file menu to configure FileMaker for WebDirect. And you can see on the left side, I don't know if my mouse can point to things over there, but no, it can't. But anyway, the names database is the one that I'm configuring. And the privilege set that I'm giving it is full access so that I can get into it, and a privilege set that I've called WebDirect Guest. And there's only one account in that that has that privilege set, and the name of that account is WD-guest. File options is the trickiest part, and you may have encountered this, so I hope that I've tried to make this one slide animate so that it can show you the actual sequence of what happens. It probably would have been better if I just made a movie of it. But the point is that when you create a login using an account name and password, in this case, the account is the WD guest. I want that account to be the login account whenever the database is open. The first thing about that you have to realize that is not shown to you in this little keynote presentation is that you have to modify your onOpen script so that if the platform is not WebDirect, that it will force the users who are the real users of the database to log in. So in the case of my psychologist client here in Denver, there are about 20 people who have accounts, and I don't want them to be logged in as WD guest. So if the platform is anything less than 3, that would mean that they are a Windows or a Macintosh user, then the script will just initiate the normal kind of a login dialog for them. Which of course they could get to that anyway by just holding down the option or the shift key to force that login dialog. But anyway, the point here is that we're using WD guest as the default login. And while you see the checkbox next to allow stored credentials, you have to turn that off. And what happens is if you make any changes to this file options, you're going to get this. Here you can see that I've turned off the show sign-in fields. You're going to get this funky message that tells you your access privileges don't allow you to perform this action. And that always freaks me out because I've got full access. So how could my access privileges not allow me to do something? So what you have to do when that happens is you have to cancel your way out of it. And you've got to go to your security accounts and change the WD guest, this default account, from WebDirect guest, where you see the little check mark next to it, change it and give it full access. I call this the hokey pokey nuisance because you got to go back and forth doing this. You got to give the WebDirect user full access, then you can go back to your file options and put in what you want. You're still going to see this message telling you about how the file is going to be opened. Then you can go back and you're going to get another one of these dialog boxes. And in the end, when you're all done with it, you can go back and you can give that user the limited access again. So my point is that if you're going to make any changes in the file options, you're going to have to screw around with the privilege set that you've assigned to the WebDirect user. First, you have to give it full access. Then after you've made your changes in file options, you take it away. Shouldn't be that way, but it is. In the privilege set for this WebDirect guest user, I've got some custom privileges specified for records and layouts. Those are the important ones. I'm letting them see all the value lists, and I'm letting them execute scripts. But what's very important is that you give the WebDirect user the extended privileges that's called allow URLs to run FileMaker scripts, because otherwise the login won't work. And in the record privileges, what I'm doing is giving them view and edit privileges for the members table where their own record exists, and for the documents table, and finally for the globals table, because all 3 of those are invoked when they're going through it. In the layouts, they have no access to anything but the layouts that are needed for WebDirect use. And you can see on the left side of the screen that I've prefixed those layout names with the letters WD, and that's just for my own comfort, so I am not confused about which ones are for the users and which ones not. The 3 that are highlighted in orange that say no access, you will see those when I show you the demo. Those are used for the printing out of any of the documents that somebody might have signed online, and that is done by ordinary FileMaker users. The WebDirect user is limited to just the layouts that they need for being able to work with the system. Now, the URL that is composed is one that I always keep track of, and I've got it broken down into parts. So the first part is the database domain name with the WebDirect directory with that FMI/WebD, and then the database name. After that, there's a question mark. In the question mark section, I begin with the script name, which in this case, the script is called WD login. And then I have a parameter, and my parameter varies with whatever kind of document is being created. So what you're going to see in today's demo is there are two documents. One is a membership application, as if somebody was going to fill out a form to join the club or the user group. And the second one that I'll show you is called a presenter agreement. In this fictitious situation that I've invented for you to see, it's as if Taylor Sharp had sent me the form to fill out for, or I should say the document I'm supposed to sign for becoming a presenter, which would have certain limitations in it that tell me what my rights and responsibilities are as a presenter. So again, each one of these documents that you want people to work with has to have a parameter of its own. So I've got a whole bunch of URLs that I create, one for each kind of document, and they're all terminated with something that is called the home URL parameter, and that is going to just mean that when somebody's done with whatever they're doing in WebDirect, it's going to go to my website. So, you know, obviously that would be your client's website, but it just means that when they're done, the WebDirect will go somewhere other than that WebDirect launch page that we're all familiar with. And then I go to Bitly and I shorten them. So in the case of this demo, 10 days ago, I made these two shortened things at Bitly, one for the membership application and one for the presenter agreement. And Bitly allows you to give it a nickname of a sort. So in this case, it's FMPUG-NA for membership application and FMPUG-PA for presenter agreement. And that way, when I give the URL to the person who's supposed to sign the form, that's all they see. And you know, it works and it converts like it's supposed to, so they don't have to deal with the long URL that I just showed you. I built a layout that I call a control panel. It's focused on my globals table. And here you see a few of the templates that exist in there. So for the presenter agreement, there's a subject and a body of the email that's going to go out for somebody. For the presenter agreement and for the membership application, I've got a similar one. And you can see that there's some variable text that I've put into those passages, which you'll see later on how I deal with that. But it's obvious that, you know, if I'm putting in a variable for first name, that when it goes out, if I was sending that agreement invitation to Greg Price, it would have Greg Price's name instead of first name. And then I have email settings so that whoever uses this can put in their own SMTP email settings for sending out email using FileMaker's basic SMTP server. The presenter agreement itself exists as a field, and you can work with this text as much as you need to. It's got some variables in it too, so you can see the presenter is one of the variables. This would put in the name of whoever is supposed to be making the presentation. I'm using text substitution in the definition of certain fields. So in this field, what I'm doing is calculating the content of the presenter agreement for whoever is going to be the presenter. And the reason for the first part of it with the text style is because I want that presenter agreement to be done in bold. And then I'm inserting the presenter's name and the date and the topic and the URL for the meeting with the next four substitutions. And again, I want them to appear in bold also when the document comes out. And there's a space on some of the forms that at least my psychologist needed, where they wanted people to put their initials in certain places to agree to certain fees. So I've put one of those into the presenter agreement, excuse me, just so that you can see how that works. And what it's doing is in the document, rather in the template text where it finds this underlined thing and in parentheses, please initial, what it's going to do is it's going to put in a space and then whatever are the initials of that person in bold. And then at the bottom, there's a presenter signature that gets substituted also. And there I'm using brush script because I found without a whole lot of study that brush script actually does appear in WebDirect, whereas most other fonts you don't get to control. You'll see some other things that suck about WebDirect when it comes to fonts and formatting. So that's the text substitution for each of the document types that you might create. Now, this is the user interface that you'll see me using when I do the demo. And it's got a self-portal, you know, the master detail kind of a layout where I've got the 500 names in a portal on the left, and I've put a type ahead filter field at the top so that if somebody's looking for one in particular, they can find it very quickly. And in the screenshot that I made, you can see that for my name, I've already got two documents that have been dealt with. One is the membership application, where I'm not keeping any PDF on file for that because it isn't necessary. It's just a series of fields that have been filled out, and the only thing that somebody would need to do is click the view button to have a look at it. And the presenter agreement, after it's been signed by the person, then there's a button that you can click that will insert that PDF into the container field, at which point the view button becomes visible and you can click the button and you can view it. And I'll show you all of that as well. So again, there are these two document types. When you first create a document record, you get this button that's called Online Invitation, and that's what uses the template text that I showed you to compose the little email that's going to go out to somebody that says, click on this URL, the bit.ly one, and here's your name and your password, your ID number and your password that lets you log in. And there's a replace button in case for any reason you wanted to replace the document with something else. And there's a send button in the case of these PDFs. So if you wanted to send it to somebody, a copy of whatever they executed online, you can do that. The red delete button will delete the related record, and the remove button will just remove the document from the container field. So again, we've got one kind of a record that's a membership application and another kind that's a presenter agreement. In the case of my psychology client here in Denver, they've got, I guess by now there's about 15 different kinds of documents. I put a button at the top so that the users would know what all these buttons do. Just a little bit of built-in help so that the people who are the clinicians working for the psychologists don't have to memorize. Obviously, after they use it a few times, they'll know, but this is just for their benefit. And then this is the email invitation that goes out. So on the left side, you see the card window that pops up when a membership application is chosen. And you can see it has my email address right underneath it. Now that is an important feature because what I've done there is I've made it possible to change the email address that something is going out to. In the case of my psychology client, it could be because the patient is a child and they want to send the invitation for the signature to the mother or father. In this case, I'm using it because if I'm going to do a demo for you, and I was sending this invitation to Will Porter, and Will Porter's email address was there, well then Will would be getting that invitation email and I wouldn't be able to show you what it looks like. So I'm able to put my email address in to make sure that I'm the one who gets the email so that I can show it to you. And you can see in this text box is the composed invitation text that uses the template that I showed you before, but it inserts the name. So it says, Dear Dennis, please use this link to view the membership application, and it gives them the URL. And if I wanted to modify that text in any way to say, you know, happy birthday, or, you know, next week is April Fool's Day, or whatever it is, I could type whatever I wanted into that text and modify the message. What you're looking at is the standard one. And if you're wondering what the letters CAPTA mean, I discovered when I was building this for you today that FMPUG doesn't have a logo, and I wanted something that has a logo. So I went back to this trade association that we never really created, that was the Custom App Professional Developer Association. And I'm just using that name because it has a logo rather than FMPUG. The web ID that I'm giving people is a calculation that I just invented, taking the square root of the UUID 4 times. That seems to result in an ID number that's got only 4 digits in length. And then the password is a calculation where in this case I'm taking the first letter of the person's name in capitals, and then I'm using the proper function to take the last 4 digits of the UUID and then the last 3 digits of whatever is the record ID. And that gives me a unique password that somebody can use for logging in. So then this is what they see if they use WebDirect to log in. They see this little welcome screen where they get to put in their username and their password and press the login button. And when they log in, they get one of these 2 card windows. The one on the left is used whenever initials are not required. And it's automatically putting in the person's name and it's showing to them in brush script. And if for some reason somebody else was executing the form, like let's suppose that you're going to be the presenter for the July meeting and your secretary handles this email for you, instead of her name popping up there, she can, or instead of your name being in there, she can change it to her own. So she's the one who's going to be executing the agreement. And the initials field automatically calculates based on whatever the name is. So if there's a form that needs initials, then it gets a slightly different card window. So the application form that I've made is using a slide control because I didn't want somebody to have to scroll through a long, long layout. In the case of my psychologist, it took, I think it was either 8 or 9 slide panels to provide for all the different things that they wanted to ask somebody in a form that they call background information. They don't need to print it out. They just need somebody to fill in the information. And then I have a little button in the bottom of the form where when you click that, it inserts the signature and the date, making it a finished item. And when they've done that, then when they click that little signature button, here you see how they could add initials to the top part of the presenter agreement and the signature at the bottom. And when they click the button to add the signature, then a submit agreement button appears. So the submit agreement button is conditioned on there being the initials and the signature in place. And if either of those are empty, then the loop just reminds them that they have to do both of those things. When they click the submit agreement button, then it comes back to the database and you get notified. So with that, I can either take some questions now or just go right into the demo. What do you think? No questions? All right.
I think I would like if you passed your parameters as JSON.
If I passed my parameters as JSON, where did you see parameters?
In your URL.
Oh, well, they're just such simple text that didn't need multiple values. But you can do that because at the end of this, I'm going to share this file and you can take it and modify it and you can put in JSON parameters if you want. So when you open the database, you're seeing the beautiful Capta logo and you click enter, and I kind of keep moving this over here. I hope that doesn't happen constantly because I'm on my second screen for you. So here, for this person, Veronica Ahorn, I guess is how you pronounce it, this morning I took care of a presenter agreement. And what happens is the status says that the agreement was created, and then I made the document. So what I'm going to do is delete that record and go through the process of making it for you. So I'll delete the record, and now I'll click this button to add a document to that person's record. So we're going to add a related record. What you get is a record which has nothing in it but today's date and who modified it. Everything else is at this point empty. So if I choose presenter agreement, the online invitation button appears. And when I click this, I wonder what's going to happen with my card window, whether it will appear on the wrong screen. We'll see. Oh, okay. So because it's a presenter agreement, there's some things that have to be filled in. So let's make believe that it's Greg Price and his topic is going to be, I don't know, give me a topic, Greg. Doesn't have one. All right, so we'll call this.
I was muted, sorry.
That's all right. And let's say that the meeting date is the 4th of July. So you've provided those three things that are going to go into the presenter agreement. And now it wants to have the meeting URL. So we'll call this www.gregprice.com, even though that's not real. And here's the email now that's going to go out. So where it has Veronica's name as the person who would receive it, I'm going to change it to my email address so that I can show you that I'm receiving email. And here, if I wanted to, I can modify this. So we'll say, Happy April Fool's Day. And if I hit cancel, it just aborts the whole process. If I hit the continue button, then I'm back where I started as a FileMaker user. And now I'll get my email open. And wait a second. And here is the email that I just received. Dear Veronica, happy April Fool's Day. Please use this link to view the presenter agreement. And there is my bit.ly link. Now, my number, I'm going to keep this handy because I'm going to have to copy and paste that. I haven't got it memorized. So I'm going to click this link, and it opens up in Safari. And I wonder if it's got to be actual size. Yeah, there we go. So the user ID I'm putting in is 3525. And the password that I've given her is VF, must be her initials, 808 389. And when I hit the login button, what comes up is the little card window, so she's confirming her name. But let's suppose she wants to put in her initials and her middle initial is Q. She can do that too. And I hit continue. And I get an instruction that tells me to use the buttons beside the agreement to insert the initials VQA and the signature Veronica H. Horn into the document. Click OK. And now I'm looking at the presenter agreement in WebDirect. This little button has please initial above it. And you can see the initials will pop in right beside the word users. And then at the bottom, I have the signature button. So we'll do the initials first. And there you see the VQA has appeared. And if I click the signature button, there's her name and today's date. When I click submit agreement, I get a little thank you message, and the page will go back to dennisburnham.com. So we'll put Safari aside for a second and go back into the database. And now you can see that the status is executed online, ready for PDF. The status has changed because the signature was added. And the date and time that it was signed is right now. And the person who responded to it is me because my email address was put in when I sent that out. So if I click the insert button, I get a message that tells me the presenter agreement has been signed and submitted by dennis@asnap.com. A PDF copy will now be inserted. Then you can send it out by email. So if I cancel, obviously it won't do that. If I click OK, it puts the PDF document in. And if I want to view it, I can click the view button. Here I'm giving them a choice to either write that file to the desktop or write it to the temporary path. So if I click no, I don't want it on the desktop, it'll go to the temporary path and then open up in Acrobat. I'm going to say yes, just in case you want me to refer to the thing on my desktop. And here Acrobat has opened up. And you can see that it's got Greg Price's name in there because that's what I put in the dialogue. It's got today's, the July 4th date for the captain meeting scheduled to begin on July 4th. The meeting location, well, here's the URL where you would typically put in your Ring Central URL, and I just wrote gregprice.com. Here's the topic that he's presenting. Here are the initials of the person who agreed to all of the above. And I wrote these paragraphs of the agreement just because I felt like it. But it tells them that, you know, there's an audience consisting of who they're going to present to, how to distribute shared files after the meeting, the confidentiality limitations, and then he tells him he's not going to be paid for doing this. Of course, Taylor offered me a lot more money for today, so I would have to modify that. Standards of conduct, he's not allowed to tell any dirty jokes, not allowed to endorse anything except for Monkey Bread software. And
Monkey Bread software.
Just wanted to keep it relevant. And so there you can see that Veronica's name in Brush Script has been added, and that's today's date. So it's now been opened up in Acrobat. And if I wanted to, for some reason, to send this to Veronica, I have a send button which would send it out to her email address that's in the database. If I go back to my email, you'll see that I also got an email a few minutes after I sent that out. First was the one that offered me the invitation to go in and sign it. Then there was a thing that the server sent that said a presenter agreement was submitted for Veronica Acorn. So this way, if you were sitting in an office and you were busy with things and it took the person a day and a half to sign it, you get an email just to let you know that they've done so. And that way you can click the insert button. So again, if I want to remove that document, the insert button appears and I can just make it all over again. That little feature wasn't working right, but it doesn't matter. The reason it didn't work is because now the status is not brand new. So if I would have to go through the whole process again. So what we'll do is we'll choose somebody else. Let's take this person named Isabel, and we'll do a membership application for Isabel. So instead of presenter agreement, I'm going to choose membership application, and I'll send out the invitation again. Again, I'll change it to my own email address so that I get the email. And if we wait a couple of seconds, there it is. Here's the invitation for the membership application. So if I click the button, it takes me in, and again, I'll put it over here, but I'm going to move my email to the other screen so that I can read the username and password, or the ID number, the member ID, which in her case is 4028, and the password is I2 lowercase a 68191. If it's typed wrong, there will be an error message saying so. So here, there's no initials needed. So it's just her name. And it tells her again to use the agreement. Now, I'm looking at the slide control that I was telling you about before. And I've tried to make this so that it fits, so that they can at least see that there's a signature needed at the end, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to submit it. So my buttons will take me to the next slide panel where it asks what's the first version. So we'll say that this person first used version 7 and they currently use version 17, and their membership type will be independent developer. And this is one of the things now that I absolutely hate about WebDirect. You can't format these little these checkboxes. You only get to use whatever is the HTML default. You can't change the size, you can't change the color. So I just put a little green thing around it so that at least you can see it. So we'll say, yes, you passed the FileMaker exam, and yes, I'm a Claris partner. And then what kind of meeting do you prefer? So we prefer virtual meetings at night, and I'm going to come in 3 times a year, and I am willing to, I didn't change the distance. This is supposed to have distance. Sorry about that. How often do you expect to attend? So I'm going to attend 5 times annually, and I'm willing to be a presenter. Do you need translation when Taylor Sharp is speaking? Absolutely, yes. And then here's another feature of WebDirect that I don't like. You can't format the size of the text when you specify the checkbox. If I go to the database and I go into layout mode and show you that exact layout, the membership application form, you're now looking at it in FileMaker. There's what the checkbox is supposed to look like in WebDirect, but it doesn't. This is what it looks like in WebDirect. And the only thing I was able to do successfully was format it in so that the other appears on the right. And if you click other, you get a box to describe what your other interest might be. And you can go back and forth through your form as you need to. It automatically populated with the name and address and phone number that are in my table of 500 names. And now I can sign it and I can submit it. And it thanks me for submitting the application form. So again, it went back to the default, the home URL of my website. Now, if I'm back in here, like I would have been, I'm on this layout where Isabel's record is the current one. You could choose any record you want, but the one you click on, of course, is the current record. Now it says that the membership application form was completed, and it was completed with today's date by me. And if I view it, it opened up in another window. So let me move that window around. It opens up in a new window. I'm in a script now, so the close window button will resume the script. But this lets me go through and see whatever the person has chosen in their, responding to the questionnaire, and it has their name. There's no submit button that's needed. It just tells me that Isabel signed it on April 2nd, and I can close that window. So I don't need a PDF of that. If for some reason I click the online invitation after somebody's already done it, it will let me send it again. If for some reason the person says, I never got your email, send it to me again, you can always do that. And here's the help button that I showed you before in Keynote. If I needed to go to see a list of all the members, I've got a button that will take me to this list so that I can do some editing if I need to. If I want to add a member record, so I can say the first name is Taylor and the last name is Sharp, and I can put in his address, Dallas, Texas 75219 if I'm correct. I can put in his phone number. Here it already calculates for me the member ID and password. So I can add records, and then that record has become the current record, so I could now do whatever I need to do to add a document for that new person. If I'm looking for members, then you'd have them all and you can go back as needed, and it went back to the home page. And there we are. If I click the settings button, it takes me to the control panel that I was showing you before. So if I had to make any changes to the basic presenter agreement, like let's say I realized that it was stupid to put in the thing about Monkey Bread software. So I can go in here and I can take out that sentence and just commit that record, and I've changed my basic presenter agreement. It's important not to change things that are part of the text substitution, because the text substitution is looking for this exact length of this horizontal rule, or the words member signature are going to get changed to the name of the person signing. So that concludes my presentation. And did I do it within enough? Yeah, I did it. It's only 11 o'clock.
Good job, Dennis.
Or 12 o'clock where you are.
Impressive, impressive. So, and you'll have this template as something you're going to share with the group in the database?
Yes, I do. And I'll show you that if I go into Script Workspace, there is a place in these two documents that I've made where there's a variable for email to, and I have Taylor being the recipient of that email. So I've been toggling this back and forth from Taylor's address to mine. I'll just take that out completely. There may be a few other things that I'm going to take out, and I guess I'll have to do something with the login account so that you'll be able to create a full access account for yourself.
Hey, Dennis.
Yeah.
We have a couple of questions if you're ready for those.
I'm ready.
First question from Charlie is, where is the system storing the PDF before it gets inserted?
Where is it storing the PDF before it gets to the server?
Before it gets inserted, yes.
Oh.
Where you use the insert.
The answer to that question is it isn't storing the PDF anywhere. One of the layouts, you may remember my mentioning this in the keynote. We'll take a look at the layout called Presenter Agreement. The WD is the one that the user is seeing when they're clicking buttons to add their signature. But the actual Presenter Agreement form is right here. It's a layout that the user never gets to see. Only the FileMaker people use that layout. And it has all the text of the Presenter Agreement in it. Okay? If I go to the very last record in the table, which would be the one that we created today, actually, that's not the one we created today. I would have to sort them. But this is one that has today's date on it. So basically, what I have here is a layout with the same text that the users saw when they put their initials in it and when they put their name at the end. So those actions that they did online in WebDirect have modified the text that you see here, just like they saw it modified when they were in WebDirect. And all I have to do in preview mode is show you that here is what it looks like when it gets printed out. So when somebody clicks the button that I showed you in the user interface to make the PDF, what FileMaker is doing is it's going to this layout for that record. It's making a PDF and saving it to either the desktop or the temporary path. And then it's inserting it into the database. Does that answer it? Does that make sense? Did I say that right?
I mean, it made sense to me.
Well, you're the guy.
Yes, that makes complete sense.
There we go. All right, and now we have a question from Lawrence Jenkins. How long did it take to build?
Well, I started working on the keynote about a month ago, and I put just the basic outline together. And then I really put, it's maybe in total about 6 hours between last weekend and now, just to get it ready. A lot of the work was copied and pasted from my client's database. I can do a quick view to show you their system. This is a database that I did not build other than the document portion. They were in FileMaker Cloud with this thing. And what they call charts, I call patient records. So if I type ahead to my own name, this is as if I was a psychology patient, which I probably should be. And if I go to the document portal, these are all the documents that they have used for testing with me, but other patients, have real ones. So I didn't really have to build this whole thing from scratch. I did a lot of copy and paste and changed the code that was in the scripts and the field definitions to make it work for what I was showing you. Here you can see that they have a much longer list of document types. The first group are the ones that are done in WebDirect. All the others were the things that I inherited that they were manually inserting, before they met me. Does that help? Greg?
Well, I mean, I wasn't asking the question, but yes, it makes sense to me.
Right. Well, you guess
Mr. Jenkins would have to weigh in as to whether or not that actually does the trick for him.
Well, I guess another way to short answer Lawrence's question would be that we're going to put this into the FMPUG thing, and he can take it apart and change it as he needed to. I documented some of it. There aren't that many scripts. The basic WebDirect login that I said applies for everybody is pretty simple. There's a presenter agreement script, a membership application script. This button called Insert a Document or Send for Signature runs whenever somebody clicks the button for the invitation that starts the whole procedure. and there's some if conditions in here. So for example, if it's a presenter agreement, then that's the URL they need. I like to put that URL as commented text because that way I don't have to look around in my computer to figure out where is that. That's ultimately what I'm going to go to bit.ly, and then it puts that text where it needs to be. The same thing for the membership application. So if this was a system that had 25 different documents, this if condition here would be a very long one. Then there's this agreement signature. This short script runs when somebody clicks the button, that little signature button. And I didn't demonstrate this, but you can clear, like let's say you signed it, but you want to change your mind. The button changes color. You click it again, takes your signature off and puts it back the way it was before. Here's a similar thing for putting the initials in. And a view document button. So this opens up the thing in Acrobat. I've got a script trigger for entering a layout that is only on that one layout that matters. So it's not that hard.
I like it. It's very nice. Good job.
Who said that?
Lawrence.
Mr. Jenkins.
Hi, Lawrence. I haven't seen or talked to you in ages.
Well, I don't have any other questions in the chat.
Okay. Taylor, you probably got one or two of these emails like this one. I'm a BCC on that, but it looks like this went to you that says a membership application form was submitted.
Yes, I got a bunch of them. I
Okay.
figured you were playing.
Right. Well, I'll take your name out of it when I publish it so that, you know, you won't be getting emails from everybody who's playing around with this.
Sure. It's all good. I figured out what you were doing. It's all good.
You probably got some earlier this week because I was poking around with it a lot on Wednesday.
I did, but I was happy to see you working on it. So appreciate you taking the time and giving us a presentation and look at some alternatives to avoid spending money other ways. So always kind of nice when we can see FileMaker can do some of these things that we used to think we all had to use other services for. So.
Yeah, and you know, just to repeat what I said in the beginning, it doesn't do everything that Docu-Sign does. So in my case with this client in Denver, they're very satisfied that it's giving them what they need. Yesterday, they came up with a new request, which doesn't involve changing Docu-Sign. They wanted to have one person in the office send out these invitations on behalf of each of their clinicians. So I have to make it so that there's a drop-down list of clinician names so that the one administrative person can operate this on behalf of anybody.
Right. Well, I mean, there's obviously some good benefits to Docu-Sign, and there's a time and a use case for it. But what's nice about the FileMaker side of it is, like, you know, so you see here, someone wants to customize some of this, you know, you're able to do some customization, which is kind of nice also. So
you could probably do all that in Docu-Sign also, and I keep reminding my customer that, you know, if you come up with some kind of a feature request that I can't do in FileMaker, then that will be the time where you have to say, let's roll up our sleeves and rebuild the whole thing in Docu-Sign. But they could use plugins if there was a need for some more customization of forms. I don't see Mark Miller on the call today, but he had me do something a few years ago for something in FileMaker 17, I believe, where they're sending out all kinds of leases and permits, and there's tons of text substitution going on. And the 360works Scribe plugin was outstanding for that. So, you know, if you did something more sophisticated than what I've done, you could use the Scribe plugin to do that.
Certainly options, certainly options. Well, thank you, Dennis. I'm glad you shared with us on it. And
Good job, Dennis.
of course, it also makes me think, you know, giving presentations, it makes me wonder what FileMaker is going to be doing for presentations at Engage in October that will be virtual this year. Since I don't think they've had any solicitation for presenters yet, have they?
I haven't heard of anything, and I don't even know what the format for Claris Engage is going to be. I think they got a certain amount of criticism for the way they did it last year, so we'll find out whether they take that to heart and adjust it or just do the same thing they did last year.
Well, my understanding is that there was supposed to be some fee associated this year, so I'm assuming that they're doing something a little bit more robust than what they did.
Oh, and we're going to pay to attend?
Yeah.
I doubt it would be nearly as much as previously.
I think one of the criticisms was, you know, these were basically just presentations, but there wasn't really interactivity with it. And I think one of the goals I think they're supposed to be working on is how to make this something where we can interact with the presenter, you know, do the questions and answers at the end and that type of thing. And I agree that would be good. I mean, it's kind of like we're doing right here. I mean, this certainly isn't hard to do.
Right.
Right.
So hopefully they have some other presenters besides FileMaker people. I want to hear from actual people like Dennis and Taylor and people like that that's doing the work every day instead of just FileMaker.
Well, they did have some of those, but they ended up, those were done offline and they kind of just rolled them out weeks later after the actual event, which to most people was of no help. The one thing that benefits us all when it comes to Engage or DevCon or whatever you want to call it, is that when we're there, we've dedicated our time to doing it. If we were to go to DevCon and just sit there through the keynotes and, you know, a couple of the presentations from FileMaker people, and then have to come home and look up people on YouTube weeks later for everything else, we wouldn't be too happy with that either. So I think they really need to take that to heart.
That's true.
Well, there's something to be said for in-person conferences, which I think when we come out of this pandemic era, a lot of people are going to want to go back to it for the camaraderie of getting together, you know, sitting around a lunch table with 8 other people and having a chat about something. You're not going to be able to do that virtually, but there's also, I mean, I have one client who ran a conference in Grapevine every year. It was the number one thing of his business. And in March of 2020, he panicked because his conference that year was going to be in Savannah, Georgia at Hilton Head. He had people signed up and paid, and he had to cancel the whole conference. Well, since that time, he's decided to change his whole business model, and he's doing virtual conferences instead, and it's tripled his business.
Wow.
Because there's so many people in his audience who just didn't come to the conference because maybe they had kids at home or the time of year or the money, whatever. So he's still charging them to attend the conference, but he's charging them a smaller amount. And maybe that's going to be what Claris does, is they charge us something to attend, but not as much as it involved lunches every day. And
yeah, I mean, obviously they're going to have to charge us less for sure.
So something to think about. I know the Columbus FMPUG and I know Richard Carlton Consulting out in San Francisco are each talking about having watch parties where we have a party that gets together to watch it as a group or something, and it might be something we might want to consider doing too or something. But I don't know. It's just something I see, you know, a PUG group and a consultant are doing, and maybe they'll.
He might have gotten that idea because of the people who were chatting with one another online during the presentations last year.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
All the Slack groups and everything. There was a lot of activity. So.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. The one that Guy split up, golly, we had a whole bunch of stuff going there.
Well, leave it to Richard Carlton to steal somebody else's good idea.
Well, I think the one thing that can be learned, especially, and obviously we don't have any information about this, but you kind of wonder, like, once DevCon/Engage went virtual, was there an uptick in attendance? And if that's the case, then they may think about in the future doing engage as like a hybrid live and online event. And that way they can charge people who don't have the time or the ability to fly out and dedicate 3-4 days to it, to still be able to attend without having all the extra expenses tacked onto it as well.
Right.
And they'd be able to do a lot.
If you think about pause on error, they took a slice of Claris business by doing an in-person thing at a lower price. I don't remember whether pause on error included meals, but if they did, they certainly weren't the quality of the Marriott buffet.
Yeah, I don't think meals were included from my recollection last year. It was just a ticket for the room. It was really the space that we were paying for, and that was pretty much it. Right.
I think at least when I went, it was in Cleveland, and I think your room included continental breakfast, but that was it. You were on your own for lunch and dinner.
Right.
And of course, the DevCons in the past always had those horrible evening events. At least in recent years. It was really nice in the old days when they took us to the wild animal park and you could, casually walk around and meet people and sit and chat and talk to the animals, stuff like that.
You mean you didn't enjoy the baseball park in Las Vegas?
What baseball park?
Well, hey, at least they had the Corvette there, and then we also got to go to the batting cages.
Yeah.
In 110-degree heat.
Yeah.
And also,
the fire in Las Vegas.
Worst barbecue ever.
Yeah.
Terrible food.
I mean,
I was like, it wasn't even worth me leaving the hotel for that.
But the hotel fire was a hit.
Oh yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. I was staying next door, so I got the outsider's view for that one.
Fun stuff. Okay.
Well, I see David Agnew there, so I just want David to know that I'm pulling out tomorrow morning at 8:15. So if you want to join me for a trip to the mountains, David, you got to show up in the morning, and you can go with me.
Yeah. A little bit of a late notice there, Dennis. Is that where you're heading? What we can see behind you?
Well, that's where I'm going tomorrow. I'm going up to Breckenridge to ski without Taylor.
Okay. Wow.
I'm bummed.
That sounds good.
Fun stuff.
We're supposed to have 60-degree skiing day tomorrow and bright sunshine. So I'm trying to get there early before everything starts to melt.
That's just about the temperature here at the moment.
How are things over there?
Oh, well, we've got a long sunny day today, the first day of the year that it's been like that. So it's hit about 60. Well, it might not have hit 60 Fahrenheit. It might maybe 57 or 8. So
what's the Brexit news?
Well, thankfully we're out. Yeah, thankfully.
Are you in the minority?
No. I'm in the majority, but in the minority in Northern Ireland. Most people in Northern Ireland want to be well financed by Europe. I don't. I want out.
And what's the popular view over there on Harry and Meghan?
That they are pretty treacherous for the ones that I know, and she is a bit of a bitch, basically.
But don't quote you.
And I know that's what I think about her. I don't think if you genuinely want to solve a problem, you don't go on to Oprah Winfrey and then tell the world. I mean, what sort of a pea-brain person does that? That's not a pea-brain person. That's a person full of malice.
Well, if Oprah invited you, would you go?
Well, it would depend what you would like to discuss, and it would depend what.
Well, suppose she wanted to discuss. Suppose she wanted to discuss higher mathematics.
Well, I'd be willing to go for that. Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm going to end the recording here so we can keep a little chatting afterwards. But thank you for coming to FMPUG. Thank you, Dennis, for the presentation, and for everybody involved here. The link will be put up on the webpage shortly, and we will be back here next month to talk about World Wide Web feedbacks with WebDirect and things like that. So I'm going to pause the recording right now.